My name is Eric Van Horn. I bought my first franchise in my 20s, and since then, I've owned 6 brands with 25 stores in 8 states. I've also helped 1,000 people find the right franchise for them. People like us who are not cut out for the 9 to 5 and like to work smarter, not harder. How do we find the right franchise, buy it, grow it, sell it, and how do we do it in a way to own the business without it owning us? Those are the questions, and I'm on a mission to give you the answers. Welcome to Franchise Secrets. Welcome to the Franchise Secrets podcast with your host, Eric Van Horn, and today's guest is Jackson Hewitt. Now, this is going to be probably one of the most interesting, fun podcasts that the listeners have ever seen. You've all heard my story. You heard how I got started in franchising. Now we get to go back to the start of this with Jackson Hewitt, was the first guy I've ever met in franchising. He was my mentor in a lot of different things in franchising. And I'm sure he has a story or two to tell about me. And I might even have a story or two to tell about him. But John, I've been looking forward to this interview for a long time. So thanks for coming on.
Eric, it's my pleasure.
So a lot of people know my story, and they know me as the guy that sold a piece of real estate in Virginia, went to a discovery day, which was actually the convention at Regent University. And then what they don't know is like how you just kept feeding me full of food, and I just kept coming back because I loved all the good free food. And then I ended up buying a franchise. So do you remember that original time when I came to that first meeting and all those different meetings that we had?
I do, Eric. As I recall, you were in your late 20s and you're trying to find yourself, and you owned real estate and were making a living off of managing a few real estate properties. And you came to more discovery days than any person I know. And I think we were your main source of food for many, many months.
That is a very true statement. And I've got to hold the record for something. But as I look back, John, there was a lot of us in that first group in that franchise that came in around the same, probably 2 to 3 year period. We've all gone on to do some really cool things in and outside of franchising. And as we get together, you don't even know this, as we get together, we talk about the things that we learned from you early on. And so I'm going to talk about some of those things that were just probably normal to you at that time, always trying to ingrain into us young franchisees, but they were really pivotal to us. And we look back on them as key things in our lives that we've taken on, and we are now echoing them to people in our worlds. So back in the day, was it easy for you to see who was going to be really good, or did you just want people, just give them an opportunity and see where it goes and give them the best chance for success possible?
Yeah, I think that I always look for quality people, but even I brought in 5,000 franchisees in my career, and even I can't always predict how well someone's going to do, because it doesn't come down to how smart you are or how educated you are or how experienced you are or even knowledgeable in the industry that you're investing in. What it comes down to is how well you're willing to follow the system. And I've always felt it was my job as a franchisor to create the top system, the top method of operation in the industry. And if I did my job, and I've done it for 51 years, if I did it well, then it's your job to follow that system. And many people over the years, I'm sure 1,000 people have told me, I'm going to listen, I'm going to follow your advice 100%. There's not one person that followed my advice 100%. So I'm always looking for that. Always looking for the right person. Always looking for signs that they're not going to follow the system, because it's a lot easier to get rid of someone initially who isn't going to listen than it is to start with them and have them fail. Because when people fail, they can only blame themselves or me, and I'm always the one they blame first.
It's so true. I've seen it. I was an area developer. We had, in Liberty, and sold that with 42 locations. And, you taught me how to echo your words to the franchisees of follow the system. And it was so normal, but I've never heard people in the culture of the franchise as a franchisee base to understand you just got to follow the system as I did being with you and part of your franchise. It was always follow the system. Was that, when did you first really understand that like that was a message that you wanted to get out to the franchisees consistently? Was it at your original one, and when did that really start?
Yeah, I think it was ingrained on me from the beginning because I've been a student in business my entire career, and I started with H&R Block, and they were, of course, the 800-pound gorilla. And when we started competing with them, they had 9,000 locations, and we had 6. And so it was our goal to become a strong national player. And in order to do that, you had to differentiate yourself. You had to do things different. If David had gone onto the field with the same sword and armor and shield that Goliath had, there wouldn't be a David and Goliath story. He'd just be the 189th guy killed by Goliath. And so we had to have differentiators, and we soon learned things that we could do different that appeal to our customers, that was enable us to compete with that 800-pound gorilla.
What were some of the things that you've changed in that you've learned from brand to brand? Because you are a franchisor of several different brands. You've been doing it for a long time. You've learned some things along the way. What is something that you thought you were so sure of early on, only to realize there's a better way to do it, or there were some shifts that happened that really changed the way you did things forward? Have you ever had anything like that happen?
Absolutely. I'll start with the 2 biggest mistakes I ever made with Jackson Hewitt. We bought 6 stores from Mel Jackson's widow back in 1982. We were all company owned locations, and 3 years later we had 22 locations, and H&R Block had 9,000. And I said, at this rate, I'm going to be about 9,000 years old before I'm going to be H&R Block size. So we were going to need to do something different. So the second biggest mistake I ever made was to not franchise right off the bat and go with company-owned stores. While that was lucrative and successful, it was never going to get the kind of growth that we were looking for. The number one mistake we made was kind of naive and clearly an error of judgment. And I'd replicated just about everything that H&R Block had done over the years that I thought they did well, which was almost everything. They're a Fortune 500 company. They were a household name. They had almost a monopoly in the National Retail Tax Corporation. And one of the things that they had done was an area representative program. And I said to myself foolishly that people don't listen to me. If I bring in an area representative, then they're not going to just not listen to me. There's going to be an area representative between me and them. They're even less likely to listen. And so I resisted and never developed an area representative program at Jackson Hewitt. Well, as a result, of those 2 errors, we still had very rapid growth. Mm-hmm. In 15 years, we grew to over 1,000 locations, and the company was sold for $483 million. But fast forward to Liberty Tax that I started, we immediately started franchising. We started an area representative program, and after 12 years, we had 4,000 locations. So we were able to move a lot quicker. So I can cite mistake after mistake that we've made, and I think that's what you get when you get a franchise system. Is you don't just get the things to do right. There's a lot more things you can do wrong than you can do right. And so what you get when you get a great franchise system is, here's this yellow brick road. Get on the yellow brick road, follow the system, and that's the only way you can go wrong, is to not get on that yellow brick road. and make the same mistakes that have been made myriad times before.
Switch roles for me. You are not the franchise founder with a ton of experience. You are a prospective franchisee wanting to find a franchise with really good systems. And they come and they investigate two different ones, one with really good systems and one with really poor systems. How do you, knowing what you know now, but being someone that wants to get into franchising as a franchisee, how do you know if they have really good systems or not?
When you build a franchise system, you deal with all kinds of people. You don't deal with all Eric Van Horns. You deal with a lot of people that are I won't try to insult people and say they're mediocre or average, but they're not superstars. And so what you have to look for is a methodology, a system, a systemization that can take over for someone who doesn't have all the greatest marketing skills, doesn't have all the great leadership skills, and you can transform them into a successful business person. So what I look for is systems that can elevate the performance of someone that's closer to average, because when you get thousands, you're going to get a lot of average people.
Mm-hmm. So I was just mentoring and coaching some franchisors and some of this stuff. And what they think are really good systems are systems for the above average or for the people that are, going to excel. They don't have systems for the average or even underperformers. And I know that you did, and you had things that were in place that were really dummy proof, for lack of a better way of saying it. They were things like, you should do this today. You need to go visit 50 businesses today, and then you need to do this tomorrow. Was everything always the systems towards the average person in your mind as you were creating this stuff?
Absolutely. You have to dumb it down to the simplest details. The people have difficulty. How many A students are there that in high school and college? There's only a small percentage of superstars. You're going to get your B, C students. And if you don't have a system that can be very, very lucrative to a B, C student in high school or college, you're going to have a failing system. And the last thing that I want, and the thing that is for anyone to invest in me and my system and not be able to have them succeed in that journey. And so, yes, and Einstein said, genius is making complicated things simple. And so I've always viewed my role as trying to uncomplicate the complicated and make it and do exactly this. And I think we were the only. I've never heard of another franchise system. There may be franchise systems out there, but at my companies, for example, we learned at Liberty. We didn't do this at Jackson Hewitt. This is one of the improvements. But I was on a conference call during the tax season more than every other day, just saying, this is what you need to do today. So even if you attended training and you forgot and you're too lazy to open the operating manual, or you weren't thinking about, you weren't focusing on the right thing, every day you were reminded by, and I was on those calls, as I said, more than every other day during the tax season, this is what you need to do today. And I think the failure to do that is why in the International Franchise Association, you only need 20 franchises to be in the top 50% of all franchises, because most franchisors or many franchisors tend to not lay it out in a simple enough methodology.
And not only that, because you were on these calls, I did not appreciate it as much then as I do now. As I look back, I've been a part of 7 different franchise brands now, and I'm creating my own franchise. And, and I look back and I'm like, that one thing of these calls at critical points, like daily, you were on these calls was extremely valuable because you brought it down to something actionable that everybody can do every day. And not only that, I see franchisees have a hard time taking action. It's not always business owners aren't always really good action takers which they should be. But if you break it down into step by step, you didn't say this is what's going to happen over the next 6 months. Like this is what you're going to do today. And this is one key takeaway that I always noticed. You were talking on there, but you also had top performers. And they might not be top performers across the system, but they were doing one thing really well. And when I say really well, that means they got actual results from it. So you were always elevating top franchisees or franchisees that were getting results. What was the methodology behind that? How intentional was that?
What I learned, Eric, is that, first of all, no one's going to listen. You have children. You have 3 children. Your children don't listen, and I know your parents well. They can vouch that they've told me many times that you didn't listen to them. So
no, that's a lie.
Right? Sure it is. Well, let's get it on the phone and we'll see. But the people just don't listen, and what I found, I would sit in meetings, and with all my experience, and back when you started, it was 20 years ago when I only had 32 years or 33 years experience, and people wouldn't listen to me. They would turn and ask the franchisee next to them for advice, and I saw people give horrific advice that was just amazing to me, that they would believe each other more than they believe me, and it's kind of a us versus them. It's corporate versus franchise. It's like you as a child, I'm sure you and your sister bonded against your parents. It's children against parents. It's corporate against franchise. And so the first thing you get is more credibility. The second thing you get is I found I divide franchises into 3 groups. One is superstars. Secondly is they're never going to make it. And third is somewhere in the middle. And the superstars you're talking about that do some things very well or many things very well, you need to nurture them. And when you're exactly right, when you get them on a call, not only are they listened to more by their peers, but it elevates them in their own mind. And they feel more part of the system. And they are even more loyal and committed because you're recognizing this. I mean, some people are mostly motivated by being recognized more than money, more than anything. They just want recognition. And that recognition is so powerful. And as I said, they're listened to even more closely. And so you need to develop a group of leaders in your organization who can help you take you to the next level.
I see that so key. And one of the reasons I'm getting ready to start a group, a mastermind group for franchisees, because they don't have that. You were really good at that. You had a system there that elevated these top performers, not in these conference calls, but you actually had meetings for them. I know a handful of franchisors that have meetings and special meetings and really learn from their top franchisees and help them learn from each other and just facilitate that. But I don't see it out there very much. That's why I'm going to be starting a group for franchisees to be able to get together and learn from each other. But when was the evolution of that, the Top Gun program?
Well, I'm always a hands-on CEO, and I prided myself in being successful or accessible to all the franchisees. And what I would tell the franchisees is, if you can't get an answer from your support person, just keep going up the ladder and keep going all the way to get to me, because I've been doing this for 50 years now. I'm the granddaddy of tax preparation. I went into every training, and at the end of the training said, okay, we would have a parking lot of difficult questions that the support people couldn't answer, or the trainers couldn't answer. And I would take the most difficult questions and answer those questions. In addition to that, I did a lot of entertaining. I had many meals when I was on the road with franchisees. I was constantly I had to eat breakfast and lunch and dinner. I always included franchisees and always sought them out and invited them to participate and ask the toughest questions, get the best advice. And again, accessibility is very, very important for a CEO with a franchise system.
So having all that accessibility for franchisees to you, and I know I've been at many dinners with you. Thank you, by the way. They were always really good and filling. But what were some of the things that some big takeaways, things that you learned from franchisees at some of these dinners or these parking lots that you held? Any big takeaways, or like, wow, that was a really interesting one, and you still remember it today?
I'd have to think about that off the top of my head. I don't recall coming away from any specific situation with a change of mind or a change of mindset. But what I do know is that, again, as we talked about earlier, my goal is to have the finest system in the industry, the best system of operations. And I know for sure that to have the best system of operations, it has to be improving. Mm-hmm. And the improvements, I could go into a room and with all my experience, I could think of, how are we going to improve this and how are we going to improve that? But that's not what I wanted to know. What I wanted to know is, how did this work for you? What was the best marketing you did in February? What was the best marketing you did in January? What was the best? How did you hire employees? How do you retain employees? How do you handle your most complicated tax situations? I wanted to know. I want to hear from the horse's mouth. When you're evaluating a horse race, you want to talk to the trainer, the jockey, or the horse. I want to talk to the horses and find out what they're seeing. The franchisees had one huge advantage over me. My big picture is way bigger than their big picture. My experience is way bigger than their experience. But they had the advantage of day after day, week after week, dealing with hundreds and hundreds of customers. They had their pulse on what the customers needed and wanted. And it's our job. I've learned a long time ago. It's you don't try to get a customer to change his mind. That's very, very difficult. Change what his goal is. What you do is figure out what they want and figure out how to get it to them. And so what I was always looking for is ways to exceed my customers' expectations. What were the customers' expectations? And what ways did they see that as a system, we were doing the best at exceeding customer expectations? And of course, part of that is eliminating the ways that we were failing to meet their expectations. So not only did I want to know what was right, I want to know what was wrong. And I think that too many people, too many leaders, not just in franchising, but in all kinds of businesses, they don't want to hear the bad news. And really, you need to embrace the bad news. That's the easiest way to learn. And again, it comes down to improving the system. Every system has to be improving, or it's not going to be best.
I think franchisees are afraid to talk about the hard things, or if they do talk about it, they talk about it amongst themselves because there's not a venue to have those things work up in a system. I was talking to a CEO of a franchise, and they were saying, Eric, there's Facebook groups out there that we're not involved with. Their franchisees have their own Facebook groups, and there's a bunch of complaining going on, and all of this and that and the other. And I said, why don't you start a Facebook group and invite them? And they did. And now that this franchise has a Facebook group, and they're getting all kinds of feedback, where before it was just, there's such lack of feedback, and it was just franchisees complaining. And there was things that the franchisor needed to know that they weren't aware of because the franchisees didn't have an avenue to be able to give that information to them. They actually wanted to help and not complain. Not all of them, because you're always going to have them complain, but they actually wanted to help improve the system. And it was a simple thing as starting a Facebook group. What are some of the other areas that you have seen to receive feedback from your franchisees?
Yeah, no one likes to give people or CEOs bad news. And so almost never, it's so rare inside my companies to an employee to come forward and say, I screwed this up and we did this wrong. I mean, it's always someone else's fault. Well, the beauty of franchises is you can't. They're going to complain about something. My favorite example is of something that you would think no one can complain about, and they're going to figure a way to complain about something. So let's say I had 1,000 franchisees, and I said, I'm going to give you all $10,000. You would think no one could complain about that. But actually what's going to happen is your biggest franchisees are going to complain and say, we're paying hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of royalties. That little guy's only paying $4,000 of royalties. If he's getting 10,000, I should get 150,000. And the little guy's saying that those big franchises are making hundreds or thousands or millions of dollars a year. I'm not making money yet. If they get $10,000, I should get $50,000. And so they'll find a way to complain. So I love that, but you have to embrace it. And so many people get defensive. One of my favorite stories is my marketing director, and I won't mention any names, but one year, April 15th was on a Saturday, so the season ended on the following Monday. And one of the worst franchisees we ever had, called up from California and said, tried to get the marketing department and said, the TV station is on their way to do a film in my office. How should I handle it? And there was the entire marketing team was in the field helping out with offices. And so no one took the call. And he sent this scathing letter about how on April 15th he couldn't get anyone to help him to deal with the press. Mm-hmm. And I went to the marketing director, and the marketing director got their back up and said, he's the worst franchisee ever. I mean, why are you listening to him? And I said, because we can learn. Mm-hmm. I said, we can learn. Why? First of all, why isn't there in the operating manual some kind of instructions for what you do when the press calls? Because taxes are it's death and taxes. And every TV station, every radio station, every newspaper is going to do some story on taxes during tax season. So we should have something in the operating manual. We should also have training, in advanced training. We need to include an hour or a half hour on what you do when the press calls. I mean, what an opportunity! What a missed opportunity. So here's our possibly worst franchisee ever, who's complaining, and it's value that added value to the whole system. And what I found is that you have to look for systems that are replicable or situations that are replicable. I call it tip of the iceberg. When something happens, is it a one-off situation or is it something that's going to happen over and over again? And if that was the only TV news crew that was ever going to visit one of my offices, one of my 10,000 offices, then yeah, we don't need to create a system for it. But if that's going to happen hundreds and hundreds of times, we need to create a system and training for it in order for it to be, again, we talked earlier about keeping things simple down to its most basic components. It needs to be able to use by the masses, not just the elite.
That is also an example of you saying you're looking so far ahead or beyond, or you're thinking differently. And I see a lot of business owners, they are just caught up in their own thing, or even people at the corporate office. They are not looking ahead. They're not looking at things from a different angle. They're just seeing a phone call come in or a scathing email, and they're taking it at face value versus looking at it from a different angle and be like, what can we learn from this? Yes, he is the worst franchisee. Yes, I was out doing other things, but I can absolutely so I can learn from this situation and not get emotional about it. How do you teach people, business owners, to think that way? Or is it easier not to have them think that way and you just think that way for them?
Well, I'm pretty lazy, so I tend to not try to think for them in the sense that I want them to think for themselves. What I do is I talk and I sign things, and other people do the work. So no, I try to create I try to create systems for the commonplace events that are going to happen in a business. And if I can do that, then we're going to exceed more and more people's expectations. And so we look for common situations to be able to exceed people's expectations. So, for example, one of the things you mentioned, one of the tools that we used in marketing is we recommended during certain parts of the tax season to go to 50 businesses a day and pass out gifts. And so one of the gifts that we recommended, donuts or pizzas or cookies, or some people would buy after Halloween, they would buy leftover candy at 60% off, and then they'd pass out that during the tax season. And I thought one way to exceed expectations would be that sometimes you go into a store and they say, "Oh no, I have diabetes, I can't have it." And so what I would teach them to do is to, in that situation, you would leave the location and come back 10 minutes later or 5 minutes later, and you'd have some sugar-free candy or sugar-free something, and it would just exceed their expectations. And so you create systems for whether you create what looks like adversity is the person, "Oh no, I can't have any candy. Please take that away." You create it into a very positive experience.
And you just doing that, those were examples that you would teach us a lot as we were growing up within that system. And you had a lot of different things that you would say. They were part of the mission statement. One of the things I remember you talk about a lot is, don't come to me with just a problem. Remember that? People would come to you with just a problem. What do you tell people that are coming to you like that?
Absolutely. Anyone could complain. Anyone could say that I have this difficulty. What I need you to do is think of a solution. And one thing I did, encouraged all the employees. I set up at employee meetings and said, all the improvements that we need to make in the next 12 months or 36 months are in this room. We need you to bring forth your ideas of what we can do, even down to the littlest idea on how we can improve our organization. Because again, if you're not improved, in my opinion, you're either improving or declining. Yep. And I'm committed to improve.
One of the things that I remember to this day is we met in the conference room. There was, I don't know how many of us in there, about 20 of us. And you came in, and the job was to create a top 10 list of the things that the franchisees should be focusing on. And do you remember going in that conference room and saying, and I think I had this right. I'm kind of nervous about asking you some of this stuff because your memory is much better than mine. But I remember coming up and talking through this top 10 list that really became the thing that was talked about to the franchisees consistently. And it was the 10 things that they needed to be doing all the time, basically.
Yeah. The important part of any communication is that it's easily understandable. There was a famous story that one of my former employees who had been in the military a submariner for 25 years, he told me this story, and he said there was this, and even though he's in the Navy, but I think it was about the Army, because he said this famous general had, maybe it was Ulysses S. Grant, had a Major Brown, and he was the dumbest guy in the whole armed forces. There has to be a dumbest guy, right? I mean, there's the smartest guy and the dumbest guy and everywhere in between, but he's the dumbest guy. And so the other officers would say, "Why do you keep him around? He's dumber than dirt." And he said, "Because if I can explain my orders to him and he gets it, then I know everyone else in the Army is going to get it." And so you guys were playing Major Brown that day, right? So I was going through and saying, okay, these are the top 10. Is this understandable? Is this clear cut? Is the average franchisee going to understand this top 10 thing to do. If not, we need to dumb it down so that every single person in this company, every single person in the field knows what are the most important things to do. And so it has to be something that can get to the lowest common denominator.
John, when we were at that company, you had goals there that were your goals, and you weren't able to reach those goals. And you were always a guy that talked about the journey as well. And I know that there's important things along the journey. So it's not just the goal, but it's the journey. How do you view goal versus journey? And what do you get more excited about? What gives you more joy?
There's a new book about that. It's by Simon Sinek, and it's called The Infinite Game. And unfortunately or fortunately, business is not a finite game. A finite game is like a baseball game. It's 9 innings, right? It's 3 outs per inning, and it ends. And you have a commitment and a goal to meet a finite number. A business is a work in progress. It's an infinite game, and the person or the people you have to compete with is yourselves, and you have to best yourselves and be all that you can be. And so, to me, even though we set external goals and had very audacious goals, and we set huge records. You were there at Liberty when we grew from 0 to 4,000 in 12 years, top 5 ever in the history of franchising. That didn't make us meet an overall number 1 goal, but we still were incredibly successful. And that put us in, again, the top 5 best ever in the history of franchising. I founded 2 of the top 100 largest chains ever in franchising in the United States. And what I learned, though, is, especially the first time I cashed in when we sold Jackson Hewitt after 15 years, I learned that the treasure at the end of the rainbow is anticlimactic. And in the meantime, if you spend all your time dreaming of that treasure 5, 10, 15 years from now, you miss life. And the journey is the joy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the journey is the joy. I see that, and I can see, as you were talking about that if you have a goal that is achievable, I could almost see you saying, like, we had a goal that was too small. We should have had a bigger goal, because it's about like you said, the journey is the joy. And I've always just wanted to ask you that, to get your perspective on that. One of my former business partners, and he's a dear friend of both of ours, called you up the other day because he and I are looking at investing in some stuff together. And we're like, who should we call to get some insight on this? And he called you up, and you gave him some advice. I wasn't able to be on the phone call. And he said, Eric, John just gave me excellent advice as usual. And it's advice that we're following through with. But it gave us just that comfort to know, like, solid advice from someone that's been there, done that, and ahead of us. How do you view relationships like that? Whether it's your past students, franchisees like myself and many of my friends, or people that you look up to, like how important is relationship with these people in your life?
I'm different. I found myself unique in 4 or 5 ways that are very rare. And one of them is I have an obsession for helping people, changing people, and so much so that it can be a nuisance sometimes. I'm brutally frank, and sometimes people don't want to be helped. They don't want to change. So not only do I have so one of the things that's different for me than other people is I want to make the world a better place. I want to help, and I want to help people be all they can be. So when people ask me, like you and Dan did, I'm honored by that, and I always take the time to always take the time to answer and give advice and give thoughtful advice. And as a matter of fact, I reached out to him a few days ago, which is a couple of weeks after he initially called, just to see how it was going because I hadn't heard from him. But I guess that's one of the 4 or 5 differentiators between me and other people. I don't tend to give advice if people won't listen. Once people listen to me, and Dan has been famous for virtually every meeting that he ever attended with me, every lunch or dinner or just a plain meeting that he asked for. We come with notes and questions, so as long as people are willing to listen and consider my advice and heed my advice most of the time, I'm very, very honored and feel good about the opportunity to be able to do that. You get as you age. I think most people in this country they want to retire and they want to relax and they want to just lay back. And to me, first of all, I don't know what I would do if I wasn't working and continuing to build businesses and change lives. I don't know anything as much fun as what I do. So that is very, very difficult for me to understand because I don't want to sail around the world in 180 days. I want to do what I do, which is build businesses, change the world, make it a better place, and to give back. And I think I'm very, very appreciative of too much is given, much is expected. And also, I've been in business for 51 years, built 2 public companies, $1.5 billion of market cap with less than a $20 million investment. I'm at the peak of my knowledge in my business career. So I'm stand ready to help people.
You are going to be remembered for a lot in business, and there's going to be things that I'm going to remember you for, and the things that you as I look back on my life and people that were influential. What do you want people like Dan and myself to remember you for as we look back?
What I want you to think of me is that at every point in our relationship, from before you joined, when you were freeloading all those meals, to you went to Kansas City, and then you expanded into Austin, Texas, and then you eventually left the company. I want you to understand this, that at each and every step of the way, before you were with me, when you were with me, and after you left me, I've always wanted what's best for you, not what's best for me. If it's best for both of us, that's incredible. But at every step of the way, I want you to understand, and Dan to understand, and everyone to understand that I've always wanted what's best for each of you.
That's fantastic. And, and I get it. I understand it. We've been in closed doors meetings, interesting dinner conversations, and have gotten to know each other well over the years. And I can see that. What I see as a big disconnect in the world of franchising are franchisors just going private equity like that. And it's nothing wrong with going private equity, because most franchisors will sell at some point to somebody, whether it's private equity or going public or taking on different kinds of money. That's an exit strategy for the founders of the brands. But what I see, John, are people that are doing it at the expense of the franchisees. Growth, unit level growth, unit number growth is more important than franchisee health or doing what's best for the franchisee. How have you seen the world of franchising change, or has it always been that way and my eyes are just opened up to it more?
No, Eric, unfortunately, it's always been that way. That is from my vantage point. Even when I was at H&R Block, it was a kind of it wasn't a love relationship. It was a hate relationship. They made a lot of money. Both made a lot of money, but they fought. The franchisees fought with the franchisor, and they weren't appreciated. So what I learned a long time ago was that the most important element of a success of a franchisor is happy, successful franchisees. And so many franchisors, I'm afraid most franchisors do not put the franchisees first. What I learned a long time ago is if your franchisees prosper, then you're going to prosper. If they don't prosper, you're going to fail. And so it's got to be a win-win situation. And I've always put the franchisees first in knowing that I need them to prosper, or we're not going to have a viable business.
Most franchisees will never know that, though. And I remember having conversations with you as I became a regional developer and area representative in Austin. And it's kind of a sub-franchisor. I was the face, I was the franchisor in their mind. And, it was that similar type relationship where they never appreciated what I was doing for them, even though I had the best of intention. I had their best intention in mind, trying to help them. They didn't see it. What's it like, for those franchisees? Speak to franchisees out there that are part of a franchise that a franchisor really cares about. Like, what is that relationship? Why is it always? Why can't it be? I don't know the word, but why is there that conflict?
Maybe it should be symbiotic or beneficial, mutually beneficial. First of all, it's not always, and it often isn't. And that's why to be in the top 50% of all franchises in the International Franchise Association, you only need 20-some franchises, because many franchisors don't get that. So I can't speak to all franchisees and say that's the right thing. But I can say this, that it's all over the Bible. It's all over just good sense and logic that if you do things for people and you expect them to appreciate it and to feel good about it, then you're going to stop doing good things pretty soon, because many, many people do not appreciate all the great things you do for them. And that's okay. You don't stop doing the right thing because people don't appreciate you. Otherwise, you'd stop day number one. And my favorite Shakespeare is, this above all, till thine own self be true. You got to do what's right, and do what's right. If you do what's right for people, you're going to be judged by a lot higher power than anything on earth.
So let's say we were sitting across from each other and I came to you for some advice as I start up this new roofing franchise with my business partners. I say, John, tell me what advice you would want me to have as I go into the franchisor side of things.
Well, I'd have to think about the bigger picture thing, but certainly things that come to mind that are tried and true is happy, successful franchises, and you have to have a very good working model, and with testimonials, and then you have to put the franchisees first, and then you're going to grow exponentially.
We have a few minutes left. I want to get into what you're doing now, but I wanted to say this one thing as, again, Dan and myself and other friends of mine that have grown up with you as our leader. One of the things that we've looked back on and we've said multiple times that we always may not have enjoyed or liked what John said or did or whatnot, but we always knew where he stood. And because it wasn't a popularity contest, you weren't trying to be liked by all of us franchisees, but we always knew where you stood with different things. And that was always very consistent as we were growing up in that franchise. And I've looked back, and all of us have, and like, we really appreciate that. And I want to be the same way. I want my franchisees, I want people that work for me to know where I stand so they don't have to wonder. Have you, is that something that you've heard from other people before?
Absolutely. And I appreciate that. And I learned after I left Jackson Hewitt, I learned the difference between honesty and integrity. And honesty is simply telling the truth about what's happened in the past. And integrity is about saying, this is what I'm going to do. This is what we're going to do. And then honoring that. And I'm fanatically committed. If I tell you I'm going to do something, then I'm I mean, I'm not 100%. I make mistakes, but I'm fanatically committed to do what I say I'm going to do. And there's so few people that have integrity. And it's not just in franchising, but success in this world is simply doing what you say you're going to do. And so if you do that, you're going to be, if that's all you do in life is do what you say you're going to do, you're going to be successful. And if you do that with franchisees, you're going to create a successful program.
So you've gone on to do other things within franchising. I know that you took what you learned from Jackson Hewitt, brought that into Liberty, and then you were with Liberty and grew that an amazing amount. And now you're doing other things in and outside of the tax business. So what are you up to now?
Yeah, we could spend a whole hour on just that. So I'm going to say it. The biggest initiatives, very simply. The first thing we did is we merged with a business broker. Instead of selling houses, we sell businesses, and so we have first choice business brokers. Secondly, looking to get back in the tax industry. I've already done it with Block. I've already done it with Jackson Hewitt. I already did it with Liberty. And now Entrepreneur Magazine in the January issue, top 4 income tax franchises in the world, in the universe. Now ATAX, my new Hispanic brand, is number 4th already in the 4th highest ranked tax franchise. So we're coming out with a tax franchise focused on Hispanic, and really the demographics has changed in this country so dramatically over the last 20 years. And it wasn't on my radar before the 2000 census, and all of a sudden the Hispanic population just came to the forefront, and it's doubled in the last 20 years. It's going to double in the next 30 years. The non-Hispanic tax preparation is shrinking. The other companies are going after that. So we're focusing on Hispanic and a whole chain of Hispanic organizations. My vision, Eric, is that there's going to be a Hispanic chain of banks, realtors, just tax preparation, and so forth. So insurance, those things are going to happen. Today, there isn't a chain of even 300 Hispanic locations in this country that focus on Hispanic, the fastest growing part of the market. And if you took the GDP of the spending of the Hispanics in this country, it's already at 2.3 trillion. If you took that out of the U.S. and just by itself, it would be the 8th largest economy in the world. And so we're going first choice business broker. We're going ATAX, a tax franchise, and we're coming out with a higher end accounting and tax, more of think of it as a mom and pop CPA kind of practice. There's no brand name in medium accounting. If you go to the largest accountants, the KPMGs and the Ernst & Youngs, and there's brand name. If you go to the lower end, the H&R Blocks, the Jackson Hewitt, the Liberty, the ATAX, there's brand name. But in the middle, there's no brand name. And there's a company in France called Fiducial that's doing it in France very well. And if you extrapolate the 700 locations they have in France, there'll be 4,000 in the U.S. So the biggest 3 focuses, I'm focusing on starting a number of different franchise organizations. But the biggest 3 are the loyalty business services, ATAX, and first choice business broker.
John, is there a central place where people can go find you, or is it just on LinkedIn or Facebook or a website?
My name is I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook, and Loyalty Brands is the name of our organization. And Loyalty Brands is on LinkedIn and Facebook and its own website.
John, any last bits of wisdom that you want to give the audience, myself, any of your current or former franchisees?
I think that what I ask of people like yourself that I've helped make 800 millionaires, and I'm glad to see you're one of them. And all the names you mentioned are are amongst the group of millionaires that I've helped in become that. And the biggest thing I can say is, pay it forward, change the world, make it a better place, but pay it forward.
John, thank you so much. Thanks for the opportunity. Way back in my 20s, mentoring along the way in a lot of different areas in business. I appreciate you as a man, as a person, as a business leader, and as a friend. So thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Eric. It's been a great pleasure. You did a great job.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Franchise Secrets Podcast. Whether you're watching or listening, please make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and to whatever channel you're listening on. If you want my help with anything from buying a franchise to franchising your business, please visit franchisesecrets.com.